freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 425 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearmsauctions.com, where you set the price on guns, ammo, and accessories. And today is our first in an upcoming series of interviews with the ladies of the Independent Women's Forum. I am proud to announce that in July of this year, I was inducted as a visiting fellow at the IWF, and we want to use this series to introduce you to all of the important and varied work that the IWF does. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Our guest today is Michele Steeb. Michele is the author of Answers Behind the Red Door, Battling the Homeless Epidemic.
In 2006, Michele joined a struggling shelter for homeless women and children and transformed it into one of the nation's beacons of success by actively addressing and overcoming the root causes of homelessness. Her written work has been published in the Washington Post, USA Today, Newsweek, and the New York Post, and now Michele is a visiting fellow, as I am, at the Independent Women's Forum. Welcome to the show, Michele.
Oh, so glad to be here with y'all and look forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. So talk to us about tackling homelessness. It seems like this just insurmountable, never-ending thing. The Bible has told us that the poor will always be among us, right? So how do we work through it? And maybe starting with, how did it become a passion for you?
I think the best way to sum up my now passion for homelessness, the passion I've had for the last 20 years, is one of my favorite sayings in the world. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I was a vice president of the California Chamber of Commerce, running their public affairs, loved my job, loved the people I worked with, and God had a different plan. I, through my church, joined the board of a struggling shelter for women and children called St. John's Shelter at the time. And I saw very quickly that the shelter needed a lot more business acumen, both at the staff level and at the board level. So I took it upon myself to recruit some more board members who helped fill that void. And as I was touring with one of them in December of 2006, touring St. John's, I got a call on my BlackBerry at the time, back when we had Blackberries, and it was the board chair saying that the shelter where I actually was, right, where I was actually touring, that the shelter had not been able to meet payroll. They bounced 2 employees' payroll checks. The food truck was not going to come because we hadn't paid our bill in way too long. And the executive director was on vacation for 2 weeks, unreachable. And the bookkeeper, who was shouldering all this burden, was just like within 8 hours, he decided to resign.
Oh, God.
So I mean, literally, this was my, in my ear for about 30 seconds, all these things. So I said to the board chair at the time, I said, we're a very small organization. Why don't I pull the staff together? Because they are very likely know all this. I mean, they were all working in the same very small office. Let's while I'm here, let's take advantage of the fact that, there's a board member here. Let's address them and share what we know now, and also share that, they need to keep doing their jobs while we take care of what our job is, which is, how to work our way out of this situation. So I did, and he agreed, and I did that. And in that, I don't even know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of discussion with the staff, I had a very strong calling that I needed to step in here in a much bigger way. So I went back to, on my way back to the office, the California Chamber, I, called the board chair and I said, here's how it went, but I need to tell you, I really feel a need to step in a bigger way. He asked me what that meant. I didn't know. My husband was on a plane to New York, so I was leaving him messages, and went in to talk to my boss at the time, the CEO. And I said, I really think I need to leave and go fix this. And he gave me some great advice. He said, just take the month of December as vacation, go in, get them squared away, and come back in January. And I agreed to do that because I really wanted to make sure I wasn't, reacting in some inappropriate way. But anyway, I knew then, and I knew on January 2nd, when I went back into his office, that my life would be changing for, the better, and my career, would follow that.
That is so crazy, this story. It's the whole thing. I'm thinking this is a perfect storm of everything falling apart. And you just happened to be standing there at that time, and you had the skills and the wherewithal. That had to be God's hand. There's just no way that.
Undoubtedly.
That is amazing.
And you fixed it in a month?
Wow. Well, I took 13 years to build it into something much more effective and much more stable. But, that work is never done, right? Just like we're never done as people, right? Organizations are never done. And I look forward to talking to you about that 13-year journey as well.
Yeah. No, but you did fix it though, because you took control and made a plan.
Yeah, you stepped in.
So that's fixing it right there, because you follow through your plans and it becomes what you have now. So
absolutely
awesome. Congratulations.
So you wrote a book. I'm assuming some of this story has made its way into this book. Do you have one there near you?
I sure do. It's called Answers Behind the Red Door, Battling the Homeless Epidemic. And it's available on Amazon.
Love it. I have mine on order. It didn't come in time for our interview, unfortunately. But that is an intriguing title. Tell me a little bit about what that red door is all about.
Yes. So I mentioned that when I started at St. John's, it was called St. John's Shelter. It was a 30-day emergency shelter for women and children. And what happened in the first couple weeks, and I talk about this in the book, is I had a woman named Katie come in our doors with her daughter, Tori. And mind you, this was 2006. The shelter actually was started on the steps of a church in 1985. So it had been around for a long time. Oh, I'm so sorry. It had been around for a long time. So again, in 2006, within a couple weeks of my getting there, a woman named Katie and her daughter Tori came in, and a couple days later, a woman named Shelley and her two boys came in. And I was shocked to learn that Katie and Shelley were actually sisters. But the bigger shock for me was that 25 years earlier, they had lived, 20 years earlier, I'm sorry, they had lived at St. John's with their mom. And it was in that moment that I said, we just can't be a 30-day emergency shelter and think we are really helping these women and children change the trajectory of their lives. So that began the 13 year journey, building out a program that, again, back in 2006, we were serving about 100 women and children a day. When I left, it was about 280, but we were serving them over an 18-month period. And we were serving them in a way that addressed all of the issues that accompanied homelessness or that led to homelessness. Issues such as mental illness, drug addiction, criminal history, lack of education, domestic violence. In Sacramento, which is where this program was based, we have a very ineffective public transportation system. A lot of these families had no transportation. They didn't have job skills. Less than 30% of our women had ever worked, yet they were single parent led, for the most part, single parent led families. So we turned St. John's over 13 years into a comprehensive program that helped women address all those issues. We had 2 restaurants and a daycare center that actually served as job training programs for them. We had a mental health unit, a drug and alcohol unit, a transportation unit, and expanded not just the breadth of services, but the number of people served. In that process, what we realized is St. John's Shelter is not really an effective name anymore for us. And so we changed our name to St. John's Program for Real Change. And we used the red door as our logo. We, changed our logo in that process. And the red door is, you may know, has, a lot of religious symbolism, but it also is a symbol of good luck and feng shui. It's a symbol, back in slavery times, the red door was a place you knew you could escape for safe haven. And as we did that, we actually painted every single door to every single room at St. John's and the front door red. And we used that as a, when the door in and of itself has a lot of symbolism. You open it and you close it. That's an actual action. You choose whether or not you're going to walk through the threshold and close that door behind you, right? So we used that door in all of our teaching. We used it in as a physical example of reminding people of the choice they're making to change their lives. And it was in existence throughout our curriculum. And so as I was writing this with one of my former board members, David Flanagan, it just was so clear that this needed to be, we learned a lot in our 13 years. And you asked earlier, if we figured out how to solve homelessness. We absolutely figured out how to solve it for a segment of the population, and a lot of learnings beyond that, which I'll get into later. But that's why we chose the title, Answers Behind the Red Door, because we really figured out over those 13 years with a lot of trial and error behind us, but what the answers were to this crisis. And that's what led me to want to write this book. I started writing it in 2019 as things were getting much worse, and it's even worse now. So I wanted to explain the lessons learned, but I also wanted to, in this book, and hopefully I've achieved that, give hope, because it does look hopeless out there in many communities, but it's not. It's not going to be an easy fix. It did not happen overnight. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but we can absolutely restore human beings, and we need to restore human beings.
All right, now more than ever.
I have so much I want to say, and I don't even know where to start. But there's homeless in every state of the union. We have homelessness, but some states are really, really overburdened with it, and I just wonder why. I mean, we have it in Arizona. California is rampant, and New York's rampant, but you sit there and you say, why? I mean, you see people that look like they're able to work, they don't seem to, I mean, of course we can't tell mentally, but they seem physically able to work and they're just not working.
Well, so let me start at the national level with a monumental policy change that happened in the Obama-Biden administration in 2013. Prior to 2013, the federal government, which over time has become the largest funder of homelessness, that's one of the problems. I'll tell you, in the old days, the churches really handled this, and they handled it much, at the community level, they handled it much better than the federal government. But over
like
time,
that.
they become the largest funder. And in 2000 and prior to 2013, they funded housing in many different forms: shelters, transitional housing, some permanent housing, which means lifelong housing, and we'll get to that at some point today. But they funded shelter, but they also funded services that help the homeless address the issues that accompany homelessness most often, including domestic violence for women in particular, including mental illness, including drug and alcohol addiction. Those things were funded in conjunction with one another. In 2013, the Obama-Biden administration said, you know what? We're not going to fund all of that anymore. We're going to fund one thing. We're going to fund lifelong housing for everyone who's homeless. And that decision, and you can look at data upon data upon data, and we're going to get to California here in a second, that decision started to shift everything. At the point that decision was made, and by the way, it was based on an idea for getting the street homeless into housing. And that idea was just fund the housing, don't require services because they won't accept the housing. There was never any research, any data that underlied this decision to roll it out as a one-size-fits-all solution. And the data that has resulted pre-COVID, this data is pre-COVID at the national level, homelessness went up 15.6% overall pre-COVID. It went up 20.5% in the unsheltered population. And pretty much before 2013, there were some increases and some decreases, but nothing that significant. In California, you asked about California. California was the only state in the nation, still is, that adopted housing first as its one-size-fits-all solution. It did that in 2016. The unsheltered population, again, pre-COVID, the unsheltered population in California went up 47.1%.
Whoa.
Overall homelessness went up 33% and some change. Wow. And it's gotten worse since then. California, again, the only state to fully adopt housing first as a one-size-fits-all solution. That's what this policy is called. California is now home to 50% of the nation's unsheltered population and 30% of the overall homeless population in the United States of America. It has been a disaster, and we'll talk about many of the reasons why, but the primary reason why is there is not a one-size-fits-all solution to any of our major ills in this country, and certainly not to homelessness.
Right. So let me ask a couple of questions. First of all, I don't want to let Reagan off the hook either, because didn't some of this start, and I might be talking way out of my level of knowledge, but didn't some of the homeless start when all of the mental health facilities were closed down because somehow that was unkind to people, to have them cared for in a facility?
So this is a long discussion, but let me try and summarize. Under Kennedy, mental health was nationalized, if you will. The federal government got involved in mental health and developed, a program, including institutions, based on some people who really didn't have a lot of knowledge in this area.
Mhm.
And Reagan often gets, a lot of criticism or credit, if depending on who you're talking to, for shutting these down. But he shut them down because they were highly ineffective. The data was showing that this model was not an effective model for rehabilitation and any sort of progress in the lives of these individuals. The intent was, when those were shut down, that a new system would be developed. But for whatever reason, there wasn't a new system developed. But people need to understand that what was being done at that point, and certainly we've seen lots of movies, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and lots of these movies who that depicted some of the things that were going on in there. There was a lot of ineffectiveness in that system.
Sure. Well, I feel like this whole story is kind of like that thing that says, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And
Yes.
the help really doesn't turn out to be that. And that whole one size fits all thing is a disaster, no matter, as you said, what the program is. But the people in California, you said they're 50% of the homeless in the nation are currently in the state of California.
50% of the unsheltered population, yes.
Are people migrating there to that, for that to be their base, or were these people that already lived in California and then became caught up in a bad time of their life and now they're and is there a difference between unsheltered and homeless?
Yeah, so unsheltered means they are largely the street homeless. So it's people who are not living in any formal domicile, whether it be a shelter or transitional housing. It typically means street homeless. So there is a difference, right? So the people that lived in the program that I ran for 13 years in California would be considered sheltered, not unsheltered, right?
Okay.
So your question was,
has California become a magnet for people to go to, or were these people already in California?
It's a fantastic question. So HUD, which is the federal, Department, Housing and Urban Development, HUD administers, well, it's administered at the local level, but HUD requires a biannual count of homelessness at the local level for any jurisdiction receiving HUD money. In that count, there is a survey that is done by volunteers that ask questions such as, and by the way, these the count is done usually around 5 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night till like 2 in the morning. So it's dark. It's done in January. It's dark. Volunteers administer it, and then you have people who, at that time at night, there's a lot of self-medication going on. There is also a lot of mental illness, sometimes both, oftentimes both. And it's dark at night, and you have a stranger knocking on your tent asking you questions such as, where are you from? Do you do drugs? Right? Do you consider yourself an addict? Right? I mean, so the count is inherently flawed. And as a result, there's data from HUD that says, most of the homeless become homeless in their city of origin, or their, the place they were living most recently. That same survey will say only 25 to 30% of the homeless are struggling with mental illness and or addiction. I can tell you, and there's been studies done since, in the program that I ran for homeless women and children, 78% of our women were struggling with addiction, 70% mental illness, 70% domestic violence, 65% criminal histories, 50% didn't have a high school diploma or GED. I can go on and on. There was an analysis done of the HUD data and by the UCLA Policy Lab, and what they found was that HUD data was very, very off. And they found that about 75 to 80% did in fact struggle with mental illness and addiction, and 70% with physical disabilities. But they didn't dive into the question of city or county of origin. But there has been some smaller studies done of that data, and in San Francisco is a great example of this. Their policies are so attractive in terms of the public subsidies that people are given when they get to San Francisco and declare themselves homeless, and the availability of drugs, and the lack of law enforcement around, public drug use. So you're seeing, and then, the permissiveness around theft, right? So in cities like San Francisco and LA, you're seeing, people being able to literally walk out of a store with $990 worth of merchandise, and no one's even following them, or even, they can't, because the prosecutors won't prosecute, and it just creates a lot of issues for the, the store and its employees. So there's a lot of local examples of that data not being, meaning the data that shows that most of the homeless are from the city, or from the city of origin of their homelessness, is showing that data is very skewed, just as the addiction and mental illness data is. Mm-hmm. However, there's a new study out of the Benioff Institute in UCSF that has reiterated this point that most of the homeless are homegrown in California, and we're having to battle this right now because the methodology of the study is flawed as HUD's methodology, and it's not really accurate. I mean, in some places maybe so, in more rural communities maybe so, but in the larger cities, again, that have the permissive policies that we just discussed, there's a lot of data showing an influx.
Wow.
If I was homeless, I think I would go to California.
Yeah.
You hear about all the fantastic benefits you get for being in California.
Yeah.
But so, Michele, if I was the president of the United States, I think I would ask you to become my person for homeless people to remove homeless. What would you do? I mean, what can we do about it?
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we should do is get rid of housing first as a one-size-fits-all solution. Not only is there not a one-size-fits-all solution, but housing first does not as a one-size-fits-all work. And I shared, some of that data earlier. Number two, we absolutely need to return to funding mental illness, drug and alcohol addiction, domestic violence services, employment training. We need to help people address the issues that most often accompany homelessness. And the lack of doing so is not only setting us up for very significant problems in the long term, it is not freeing people to be all they are meant to and are designed to be. It is holding them down in dependence, and preventing them from realizing their potential. And it is, I call it, one of the most oppressive policies in this century, and I very much believe that. And I would love to join you as President of the United States in turning this around. The third thing I would say is we need to give communities flexibility to do things. Phoenix looks very different than San Francisco, that looks very different than Austin, that looks very different from Dallas, that looks very different from New York. We need to give communities the flexibility to do what they feel needs to be done to, move the homeless into places of restoration and growth and prosperity. And that can be done. And again, that's why I wrote Answers Behind the Red Door. But right now, communities are very hamstrung by these policies. The fourth thing I would say is never, ever, and we talked about you talked about this at the beginning, never say end homelessness. It will never end as a illness in our country. It's biblically stated, but it's just, anyone who's been in the field will say this: you can end homelessness for individuals, and the book walks people through how to do that. But we should never, anyone who says end homelessness, when you see that from them, turn around and run away as fast as you can, because it is such an empty promise. It is so, it just sets us up, it sets them up, and it sets the homeless up. It sets all of us up for failure.
Yes. And I'm sympathetic to the homeless. I want to help people that are homeless, and I want to help. But the thing is, how do you know? I want to help people that want to help themselves. I don't want to just give somebody something that tomorrow they're in the same place doing the same thing. But there's people out there that want help, that need help, that will do something with the help. And there are others that just don't care. And I wish we had little labels on their head that you could tell who that was, because sometimes I feel guilty because I don't help someone, but then I just don't. I don't know.
Sometimes you're helping them stay stuck, I think is what he's.
It's a very, and again, everyone is an individual, and what is motivating to one individual may not be motivating to another. And I talk about this a lot in the book, but my response to that would be, number one, find an organization that helps restore human beings that are struggling with homelessness, and volunteer there, give your money there, really support those organizations, because those organizations are not qualified for public funding, because those organizations require service engagement, such as mental health counseling, drug and alcohol counseling, employment training. And the reason I know this is my organization lost $1 million in annual funding in 2017, not because of our outcomes, but because all of a sudden requiring employment training and requiring budgeting and requiring, engagement and sobriety, those things all of a sudden became, wrong and passé. So organizations that are still surviving under the model of really helping restore people, they need our help. There's no help at the federal government level and at the local government level, because the federal government distributes most of its funding through the local level. So they control policy and funding, not just at the national level, but at the local level. So support those organizations with your time, with your money, and encourage those people. When I was running St. John's, I kept my business cards, and I handed out hundreds and thousands of business cards over my 13 years. And I never gave money, but I said, my cell phone is on this card, call me and I will help you find a place. If you want to find a place to, because my organization was women and children, and not everyone, there was men and, lots of people I ran into, but, find an organization, give out their business cards, encourage people to go there to get the help they need. It's not going to happen if we're enabling them to continue in the situation that they're in. But I do need to say, a lot of those organizations that were so effective have, ended up closing their doors or shifting to the housing first model, because they're following the money. They're following the government money.
So your organization, you started out that they were in for a month. They could stay for a month. And you saw that wasn't working because they need more time. When you give them the extra time, how many do you think you've really helped, percentage wise, that really helped, that when they came out of your shelter, they were set.
Well, again, we didn't call ourselves a shelter after, a couple of years. But, the thing that we broke our success into 5 kind of buckets. Not everyone who came in needed to go all the way through the program. So the first bucket was, stabilization, getting people. We had people who came in, and there's a woman named Carla that I'll use as an example. Carla was suicidal. She was severely addicted, and she had mental illness, and she needed stability. She had a job, but she couldn't keep her, she had to keep going on leave of absence because she couldn't get her mental illness and her addiction under control. So she left us after 2 months, and she continued to come back and engage with us, but she didn't need to live with us for longer than 2 months. She had a place to live. She had a job, but she needed that stability and that footing that she just couldn't get on her own. Then there are people who, like Alicia, and she just literally while we were talking here, she sent me a note. Alicia was a mother of 9. She came to us at 47 years old. She had lost custody of all of her kids but 2. She had never worked a day in her life. She was a very severe addict. And she took about 2.5 years because she had a hepatitis issue in the middle of her stay that she needed to go to the hospital and get taken care of. But today, so this was probably when Alicia was with us and her 2 daughters, Hillary and Memes, it was probably around 2011 or 12. Alicia got a job at a local business in Rancho Cordova. And this is 12 years later, she still has that job. She's reunited with all of her kids. She never even worked before, and she was 47 years old. She has her GED, she has her high school diploma. She's sober, right? So success looks different for every individual, but I would say if I were to, guess on how many people are living much better lives right now, I would say it's probably 80 to 90%, but not everyone has stayed on that path. And certainly the pandemic, was very hard on a lot of people, including our women, especially in California, because of the isolation and the lack of services available to people who are struggling with addiction or mental illness. So we saw more deaths. I wasn't with St. John's any longer at that point, but we probably lost 5 or 6 women to either suicide or addiction during that period of isolation.
Right. Oh,
extreme isolation.
Well, thank you for what you've done. That is awesome.
Absolutely. So we could keep talking forever, I think.
Yes.
But our time is getting short.
You told me to shut up.
I did not. I wrote him a note and I said time. Like, look at the time.
What does that mean?
Okay. So I do want to shift gears just a bit because we know each other because of the Independent Women's Forum. Yeah. I just want to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about what that is, and then ask you what you hope to do with your visiting fellowship. So the Independent Women's Forum is the leading national women's organization dedicated to developing and advancing policies. Now, there's that word policies again, and that can be real tricky. And so I think they're smart that they're bringing in people like yourself and me to talk about the Second Amendment, because we can get into those weeds and the nitty gritty of what's good and bad about policy, right? And they want policies that are more than just well-intended, but actually enhance people's freedom, opportunities, and well-being. And they use the news, podcasts, blogs, and their topics are generally, the Independent Women's Forum's topics are economic opportunity, energy and conservation, culture, law, national security, and Second Amendment issues. And, you described a little bit of a gilded cage, like a sick little gilded cage that the government has created for the homeless issue. So that is a policy that doesn't work. And the idea of freedom and opportunities and well-being, if that's at the core, which it is of the IWF, the Independent Women's Forum, and also the work that you've done, I just think that makes such sense that they have brought you on this year as a visiting fellow. But I wanted to ask you, what do you hope to do with your time during this fellowship?
Well, similar to why I wrote the book, right? I absolutely want to help people understand what the policy ramifications of this one-size-fits-all approach to homelessness that has now been, by the way, when they rolled it out in 2013, President Obama literally said in writing, it would end homelessness in a decade. And we are a decade later, and it is the worst it's ever been in our country. But I definitely want to bring awareness to that policy, to what's needed. But I also want to give people hope. Again, similar to the book, I want people to understand that people can be restored. And I have so many, there's 11 stories of women in that book, but there's so many more that I could have written about that, people who, I'm friends with so many of them on Facebook, and they'll send me a note and they'll be like, you wouldn't believe it. I took my family on vacation for the first time ever. And, I have a savings account, and there are women, single mothers in California who are homeowners now that went through our program just 4, 5, 6 years ago. So it's absolutely possible for the vast majority of the homeless population. I would say between 80 and 90%, they can lead lives that are so free of addiction and dependence and lives of prosperity. But we need to support them in doing that and lead them in a way that current policy doesn't. So I really hope to bring light to this and hope. I also am very concerned in particular that the federal government really excludes homeless families largely from their counts and their funding. And that it's just not such, it's a moral failure, but it's really setting us up for a long-term problem if we don't help these families get the help they need when they're homeless and struggling with these issues early on to get back on a right path. So I'm also hoping to really bring awareness to that issue in particular, because there's no other organization talking about it in a substantive way.
Wow.
So what we're saying is the government's one-size-fits-all policy doesn't work, and that if they would change that and forget about the one-size-fits-all, that these people would become taxpayers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Many of them would, yes.
Yes.
But the policy today just puts them in housing for life, doesn't require them to work, doesn't require them to be sober, doesn't require them to do anything more with their lives ever.
Isn't that kind of what it feels like the government's trying to do anyway? Purposely? They're just purposely bring everybody down so that they can be controlled.
Yeah. So I have one more quick question before we have to dive off of here. How much of a issue, or how much, because there resources, there's only so many, right? And we've got this whole border issue. We've got people just flooding in. And I know that's not, the border issue is not your topic, but are we seeing a competition for the resources for people that, they've just arrived? How are they supposed to have anything? Are they also part of this, housing for life situation, or how does that work?
Well, it depends on where they go. I actually wrote about this not that long ago for New York City. They're facing a double, if not triple whammy, because New York City obviously is a sanctuary city. So they're attracting a lot of the folks coming over the border that are not going through the legal process. Right. And number two, they have a right to shelter policy. So all of the people that come there need to be sheltered. And New York is literally, they've run out of, they're leasing and spending billions of dollars on hotel rooms for this population. Meanwhile, the homeless are not being treated in nice hotel rooms, right? But what's more, they're not getting any significant aid from the federal government. And I am really concerned about what's going to happen in New York City. I mean, there's no wonder that so many people are fleeing. I mean, they're fleeing because of policy, they're fleeing because of taxes, but they're also fleeing because of what's happening on the streets there. And they have set themselves up for an impossible situation. They need to shift gears, policy gears, in order to be able to manage, both the people coming across, the border illegally, and the homeless population. And they're not doing a good job of either right now. But I don't know who would. The first thing they need to do is change policy and not bind themselves to having to take care of everyone who comes there.
But Michelle, we can't change policy because that'll put egg on our face. I mean, we can't, and it's true. So they're just going to dig deeper down in the hole because they're afraid to just, hey, this isn't working. Let's change it. But I was just thinking when you guys were talking, I go, if I want to go to New York, I'll just go there and tell them I'm homeless and I'd get a hotel. I wouldn't have to pay for a hotel.
Exactly.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway,
so
it's
upside down. Well,
no, you have to tell them you came across the border illegally, and then you get a hotel. If you tell them you're homeless, you get put in a place with cockroaches.
Oh.
Well, you have given us hope that there are programs that work. And it does take work. And a lot of times the government comes in and mucks it all up. And well, I'm sad that you don't have access to those dollars. Maybe, again, going back to that gilded cage idea or the
control. It's
the
a control
idea. Maybe it's better that you don't have that access to money. But we, individual citizens, need to reach out and help and step up the way that we know we should, even though we are taxed to death. And sometimes I think because we're taxed, we think, well, we've done our part for charity, right? Because the government's going to do it for us, but they don't do a good job. All right. We've got to get out of here, but thank you so much. I am excited to meet you, to be doing this work at the IWF with you, and to have had this opportunity to talk and introduce you to our audience. I know this isn't really a Second Amendment issue, but homelessness impacts all of us because of all the reasons that we said. So I think it's appropriate.
Well, how do they follow her?
Hold your book up one more time and talk to us about how we can buy that and follow you.
Answers Behind the Red Door, available on Amazon, and I'm on X, formerly Twitter, at Steeb Michele, on LinkedIn and on Facebook, though Facebook I usually use for more personal announcements. But anyway, would love to have you get the book and reach out to me and share with me your thoughts. And really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I have a feeling we'll be talking again because this issue isn't going away anytime soon.
Well, I have 37 more questions.
I know, it's true.
We're definitely going to have you on again.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Just God bless you for the work you're doing.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Michele Steeb.
She's great.
I have not had goosebumps as many times in any other interview I think we've ever done, but she would say something and it would resonate with me. Such truth that it would just give me goosebumps.
It's interesting to me, the policy thing. I mean, we've been in business all our life, but we've been in business 25 years, basically here, 21, 25, who counts anymore?
Well, we've been married for 30, many?
38.
So we've been in business all that time.
But we got into a major business 21 years ago.
Fair enough.
And where we had several employees, and every business has to have policies.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
I'm a
true.
firm believer that no policy fits everyone.
Right.
And that my biggest struggle in the 21 years, even to this day today, is that you have a policy, but it morphs, it changes, it
Mhm.
adapts. There are certain circumstances where things don't apply to that. And
Mhm.
you have to have enough sense to know where can you make these changes? What
Yeah.
can you do to make changes? And that's been a big struggle because I've had people that are firm. This is the policy, do not change. But then I've had other people say, no worry about it. Which you need a happy medium,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
anyway,
It's so true.
seeing her when she, helped that organization, they had policies. I'm sure she morphed and adapted them to fit.
You have
So,
to, because
right.
when you're dealing with individuals, like she said, everybody's life circumstances are different.
Right.
Their level of commitment to the program is different. Their ability to break their addiction cycles are different.
Right.
But 80%, she thinks,
That's
or more,
awesome.
have come to a whole new way of enjoying their life and being fulfilled in life,
Right.
rather than just plodding one day through the next. Wow, that's amazing.
Yep.
Well, we have got to get on out of here. So thank you again to our amazing guest, Michele Steeb. Thank you to the Independent Women's Forum for bringing us together, right, as both visiting fellows. Of course, I'm going to use my time as a visiting fellow. I've already written a few blog articles and a fun one called Two Truths and a Lie. So that's going to be fun about the Second Amendment. We're going to be doing lots of work, really just a continuation and expansion of what I'm already doing to advocate for individual citizens to step up and be involved in protecting their rights, including and especially their Second Amendment rights. But thank you to our awesome guest, Michele Steeb. Go get her book, get educated, figure out how you can be a help. Thank you to our amazing audience, our listeners and viewers all over the planet. Wherever there is internet, we have people who are hungry for this information that our subject matter experts bring to the airwaves. And then when you out there take these conversations into your homes, around your dinner tables, into your carpools, that's when real change happens, because now you're really impacting those around you to bring them into the conversation.
Right.
If you would like to rewatch any portion of this video or any of our videos, go to YouTube or Gunstreamer, one of those, wherever you get your video content. And when you do, please hit the subscribe and the notifications button, because why? Because that tells those platforms that you value what we talk about on here. And it gives us a little bit of a cushion and a hedge against getting canceled, because that seems to be all the rage these days, is canceling unpopular ideas. And if you want to listen to the audio only version of this show or any of our shows that we've done over the multiple years, go to our website, Wow, these noises that are popping up on my computer. I apologize. GunFreedomRadio.com. Click the on demand tab and binge listen to your heart's content.
That's my line.
That was your line. And
What
I'm
are you
so
doing?
distracted with what's going on in my computer. I stepped on it. I apologize. And if you want to see photos and bios of all the work that all of our guests have done, go to the guest tab. It is a huge resource. And when you spend time there, we don't hate that. All right. So what are we going to do now, Dan?
I don't know. You tell me. I think we're going to pray for our nation.
We are. We're going to pray for our leaders. How about the ones we don't particularly care for?
We're going to pray for justice.
Okay.
With our leaders.
Yeah.
That answers the next question.
Yeah.
Right.
Equal
if I'm
and
praying,
blind justice.
If I'm praying for justice,
the whole Hunter Biden thing.
Yes.
Right now?
If I'm praying for justice to be done, that kind of tells you what the next one. Pray for all of them.
Yeah, we still need
I
to
guess
pray
so.
for
Yeah.
all of them.
Pray they get a nice prison cell with the.
Because we.
I mean, did I? I didn't say that.
Sitting in the studio on Tuesday, August 1st of 2023, and right now the whole Hunter Biden,
Laptop
Joe
thing,
Biden, laptop craziness is going on with the DOJ.
gun buying with
seem-
gun buying felonies and
seeming as though they are playing favorites, and so that's what that's about. But that's a different topic for a different
they wouldn't
day.
play favorites for
No,
anybody in
of
that.
course
No, they
No,
no.
politics are not at all involved in our justice system these days, right?
Right.
All right, where were we? We were
We're
praying
saying
for
goodbye.
everyone, maybe especially for the ones we don't like. And until next time, be good to each other. Have a great week, and God bless.
Bye bye.